Bad Bunny is the #1 artist in the entire world, bigger than Taylor Swift, bigger than all these other folks, right? Bigger than Kendrick Lamar, has the highest streaming numbers, all these other things. You have to understand that part of Bad Bunny's really kind of rise and ascent to fame has been really kind of rapid in the last 8 or 9 years. The man was making SoundCloud songs, bagging groceries in Puerto Rico, was picked up by a record label. He had a song that went viral and had 1 million plays in 4 days. He got picked up, and he's only continued to really build out, I think, a lot of capacity and culture for brown folks. You know, Latinos are going to be the largest group, racial ethnic group in the United States, upcoming in the next 20, 30 years.
I think they're already there, actually.
Definitely, if we count folks under the age of 18, that's where we get caught up all the time. In Colorado, we're only 22% of the population that is over the age of 18, but Latinos actually make up a much larger swath. The average age of a Latino in Colorado is 12 years old.
Wow.
And so our population is going to boom, and I think Bad Bunny really speaks to the cultural moment that Latinos are on the precipice of. Part of the reason the deportation machine of the, to use your word, the empire is cracking down so hard on folks that look like me, that come from backgrounds like we come from, is because white folks understand just exactly what the population dynamics are going to be. By 2050, the United States will either become a multiracial democracy governed and led by multiracial people, or we will be the same white supremacist democracy, except for Latino folks will be the folks upholding white supremacy as far as I'm concerned. And I think Bad Bunny rising to fame to the point of a Super Bowl show gives us a clear alternative, at least for Latinos across the United States, that we don't have to abide by white supremacy. We don't have to play white folks games, that we can double down on our own culture that is bigger than a people, that is bigger than a race, that is bigger than a border, bigger than a language, and double down on really where our people come from and the politics that are necessary for us to get towards freedom, some of which we saw represented yesterday. So big fan of Bad Bunny over here. I went to his show a couple years ago here in Denver. He's a good dude.
So you've actually been in an audience and seen Bad Bunny perform?
Yeah, I will say my Spanish is not up as much to enjoy it, because Puerto Rican Spanish is also just a different dialect of Spanish. But dead ass, I've been to see him perform. I think he's not only just a good performer, but part of what I think is really appealing to him is he's never doubled back on his narrative. He was told really intently and on purpose that as almost every Spanish-speaking artist that has wanted to break into a global industry, they're told that they have to speak English, that they have to make English music, and Bad Bunny has never ever made an English song. He has never performed in an English concert.
Say a word of English yesterday. Not one.
And that speaks to, we can do the Super Bowl halftime show and double down on our culture, on our people, and understand that there's still power and capacity in that. And I think him not walking back on that, at least to brown folks and Latinos, gives a deep sense of cultural pride that we don't have to conform ourselves, cut our own tongues out of our own mouths to be able to fit into whatever version of the United States of America that he even gave us some American continentalism, which we can talk about too. But,
man, see, we've got a short time to talk about a lot of information, and I want to kind of get you all's perspective again. Clearly, I hadn't heard of Bad Bunny because he hasn't delivered his content in a language that I can understand and consume, which I think was beautiful about the Super Bowl halftime show, having someone putting other folks in other folks' shoes, saying, listen, you're going to hear some things, but it's not going to be tailored to the language that you speak in, and we're still going to take center stage. I think that is beautiful. I know that historically there's this strong black-brown alliance that has always been in place because we've always listened to the same music and we've always experienced the same conditions here in North America, particularly these United States of America. But when we start thinking about Bad Bunny and the language piece, me speaking English right now is speaking a colonized tongue, and Bad Bunny speaking Spanish is speaking a colonized tongue.
Right.
I'm used to being around Chicanos. You know what I mean? I grew up with Chicanos.
Right.
Then all of a sudden,
represent,
now all of a sudden we're talking Latinos. You know, and then everyone ties the Spanish language into Mexicans, but then Mexican and the word Mexico is not a Spanish word.
It's an indigenous word.
It's an indigenous word.
From the Mexica, right.
Isn't this an opportunity for a great education teacher?
I wish I could tether all that as succinctly as you did, but no, I really identify with what you're saying. That's why, you know, I teach Chicano studies, and a lot of our conversations are really rooted around, you know, Bad Bunny didn't speak English, right? It's not his first language. English is also not America's first language. And so really just kind of cutting through the fat of those pieces I thought was really beautiful. You know, I think a lot of folks think that politics or geopolitics or colonialism, these things are crazy inaccessible, that we can't understand them, when fundamentally folks like Chicanos, who are me, you know, like we know what it is that the border crossed us, and that 150 years ago, this place that we call Colorado in the United States was a region of Mexico, that prior to that was an indigenous region, that prior to that, you know, that there's a way that people understand connection to history and land that is really succinctly presented in a place like the Super Bowl. You know, like I even think, you know, I was really happy, you know, I'll be real, I was kind of afraid during Bad Bunny's performance that he was going to kind of tilt back towards centrist politics, these other things. Even in the symbol of the Puerto Rican flag that he waved yesterday, at no point did you see the United States version of the Puerto Rican flag. What you saw yesterday was the Independista flag of Puerto Ricans, which is different. It's not the traditional United States blue. What you have to understand about Puerto Rican history is that Puerto Rico was made a U.S. territory as a result of the U.S.-Spanish War. The U.S. defeats the Spanish in their war, and we inherit Puerto Rico as a territory. But what's important to remember is that territories are given all of the American oppression with no American opportunity.
Right. You can't vote on nothing.
So you can't vote for president if you're born in Puerto Rico, but they are forced to pay federal taxes to the United States. And so they don't have a congressional representative. They don't have any version of participating in our democracy. But we do extricate their resources. We do take their sugar. We do take all kinds of other pieces. And so really territory isn't even an appropriate word for it. It's a colony. Mm-hmm. And I think the Puerto Rican flag is a clear symbol of that. If you look it up, there was in 1955, there was a gag law. The United States banned the waving of the Puerto Rican flag with the light blue on it because it was a symbol not for Puerto Rican statehood, but for Puerto Rican independence. And I personally believe, and a lot of Latinos really identify with the idea, that Puerto Rico should not be a colony. They should not be a 51st state. Puerto Rico should be an independent country. And even yesterday, Bad Bunny performed the song Lo Que Pasó Hawaii, which is what is up with Hawaii, and he's critiquing U.S. imperialism and colonialism, saying, I don't want Puerto Rico to turn into a Hawaii because their indigenous people were eradicated, their culture was commodified, that it was literally broken down into a white haven in the middle of a region that was thousands of years old, that had cultures and histories and continental understandings and epistemologies that was much deeper. And so when we apply that to the case of Puerto Rico, we have to understand that the past is the present, and there is no separating the way that Puerto Rican independence fundamentally fits into the narrative of American politics today. So I was really grateful that we got to see it on full display yesterday for all of America, regardless of whether you understood the language. I feel like you definitely caught the vibes. So.
Well, and not only catching the vibes, and Theo, I want you to kind of critique the performance, the artistry of the halftime show, because even though I couldn't speak the language, I could understand the symbolism.
Yeah, so
you know, I could understand the symbolism, and I was looking through some of the things that was being portrayed on that stage. And what was really interesting, I thought it was a masterful marketing approach on behalf of Apple. In other words, we're going to give you a performance that's going to be totally in a different language, but if you wear these headphones, they will translate for you. Mm-hmm. So
scary, dog.
They will never do anything that doesn't have an impact on the bottom line. Even to their greatest demise. You could say whatever, but as long as they're making $1, you could be saying whatever and they'll still make $1, while at the same time, you know, getting the rug pulled from under them. That's the magic of capitalism, is blind to everything except the dollar. That's right. But here's one of the things that I saw, Theo, and then you tell me what you saw in terms of the halftime show, and then also Tim, tell me what captured you in terms of messaging. When he was talking about God bless America, he brought up a whole bunch of flags because the United States thinks they're America.
And there's one
They
country.
have no understanding of geography. And all of a sudden, all of these American flags started showing. I'm like, that's dope. What did you see? Any messaging? And was this a significant performance in the service of social justice and equality?
I saw a loud and unmistakable clapback in a culture war that has turned to a bloody war on bodies. On a platform that many of the culture warriors on the far right were watching that night. What I saw was an unashamed Puerto Rican showing all the shades of Puerto Rico. I saw plenty of Afro-Latinos up there.
Yes.
Right.
I saw plenty of them up there. And I said to myself, now a lot of us, and this bothers me about the current state of a lot of the mindsets of black Americans, because I see a couple of y'all comments on there who've been baited into right-wing xenophobic ideology in the name of reparations that we've never been further away from getting with the right-wing administration, but we're going to talk about that later. What I see right now is the machine that we are all too familiar with as black folks being turned in all of its insidious might on what the machine perceives to be the greatest threat to the white majority. Not realizing that you can wage a backward-facing right-wing war on bodies, but the culture already has passed that. We've already gone past that. They're waging a 19th century tactic in a 21st century and beyond culture. In other words, the diversity toothpaste is already out the tube. Wow. You actually can't put it back. And yesterday was a statement that not only says that Bad Bunny speaking out for Latinos in this moment, in their moment of trial and tribulation, he leveraged capitalism to do it. He leveraged what you saw, the translating headphones. He leveraged the fact that there would be advertising dollars all over the place. He leveraged that on the greatest platform to show all of this body snatching, all of this kidnapping, all of this culture war and body disappearing means nothing right now. And that we're going to show you to your face. And I know they was crashing out on right-wing media. Crashing out, just crying. I was like, that was the worst performance in any halftime Super Bowl show. We've never seen something so terrible, so bad. But the facts are, that toothpaste that they're trying to put in the tube will never be put back. And I could see this as a turning of the tide.
Wow. Tim, I've got to ask, as we move forward in this conversation, I'm very clear on what a Chicano is.
Yeah.
And its relationship to these United States of America. Familiar with Mestizo Curtis Park, as a matter of fact, the blending of the different cultures. Talk to me, what is a Latino? What is a Latino? And just help me there as we start piecing together all these different identities.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Chicano, right? So that historically is rooted in like an indigenous truth and also simultaneously deeply connects with the history of Mexico, the history of these other components we call Aztlan and these other things. Latino is a complicated word for brown folks, right? I think we can understand that Hispanic and Latino, all these other iterations of people that are labels among people aren't things that we identify ourselves, right? Like, I don't think anybody is walking around as an indigenous person saying, I'm a Latino, right? Because it is rooted in a Western perception, language of the world that Latin America is where Latinos are from. That's etymologically how it's supposed to work. And so that's why folks, in Latin America, everything from Mexico all the way down to Chile, they identify as Latin America or might be Latino if you have cultural heritage too, but simultaneously those folks might not always be Hispanic, because Hispanic is about connection and proximity to Spanish language, heritage, and culture, right? So people from Brazil are Latinos, but they are not Hispanic because they don't speak Spanish, right? People from Spain might be Hispanic, but they're not Latino because they're not from Latin America, right? So there's these weird things, and I really like how you would pose this idea of these old ideas turning into new things, right? I use the word Latino to describe myself even though it's flawed, because I do believe that in the United States, at least, that's what my people call themselves. And I do think it's really important because Chicano, while it is rooted in historical truth, really deeply mirrors some of the white supremacist tactics, that it was only for Mexicans, or it was about indigenous repatriation and land back. But what does it mean to be able to reclaim your homeland when no land belongs to nobody, right? And so I think that I really like Latino because it does kind of get at these cultural intersections that I appreciate about unity, and specifically kind of talks with people about the ways in which Latinos are connected through language, culture, suffering, oppression, that I do think are really important. And more importantly, at least I have the opinion that, like, if my folks are calling themselves that, then I'm not gonna I have a college degree, I teach this stuff, but I'm not going to make myself better than the people and explain this.
Wow.
And instead say, you know what, Latino is what we're going with right now, if it's what we can rally behind, because, until we all identify as Americans, which, continental America is important to remember in that equation. That's what Bad Bunny's talking about.
Okay.
He says, God bless America, not to the United States, right? Like, he says it to continental America, around the world, Brother Jeff. They teach that there are 6 continents around the world.
Yes.
The United States is the only place that we teach that there are 7.
Yes.
We are the only people that distinguish between North America and South America, and that is epistemological colonialism. It is driven to distinctly separate ourselves from the continental people who are historic to the land and have lived throughout the land. I think part of what I was really grateful to see in Bad Bunny's performance, yes, was the shouting out of all these American countries, but I also thought it was really important to be critical of the United States while you do that, right? That 2 Americans live on the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Let me just teach you real quick that America has a whole lot more to do than with the United States. It wasn't until I was in college that I had a professor teach me the idea of Americans versus United Statesians, right?
Right.
In the United States, we are United Statesians. We aren't necessarily Americans because we are not tethered to a continent. This is a settler colonial project,
Perfect.
right? Like,
perfect. Go ahead.
No, that's just the point that I think when we talk about where we connect in history and culture and language, why Latinos are so deeply connected to those pieces are not because we identify with the term Latino. We might now, but we identify with our culture, our people, our land, our history, our heritage, that is much deeper than a single word could ever capture.
The principles of America have always been at odds with its practices. And those who live in the American empire are acutely aware that not even those of us who have been oppressed within the empire are aware of. And a lot of us, our oppression is so hot, it hurts so bad, that we don't see that somebody else is holding it equally hot but different cold. Bad Bunny brings to the fore that America's boot is still, the United States' boot. See how this is still an unconscious way of speaking. The United States' boot is still on the necks of people that are literally being extracted from and cannot be deported because they're already a part of the body politic as we know it. And that was a very interesting thing that I saw. He's Puerto Rican, yo. He's not somebody, in other words, he is underneath, and I'm guessing everybody, Ricky Martin on there and everything.
Yeah.
These nuances, it was a very resurgent nuance that he brought.
It's like if you know, you know.
If
right?
you know. But a
right.
lot of us don't study outside of the basic narratives about who's who in America. So I was in North America, in the United States, and I'm very glad that he brought that unto our attention, because these principles and practices we are all too familiar with being at odds with another. Because what is America supposed to be? A set of principalities and governing ideologies. That's it. It's not so. It was never supposed to be, at least on paper, a race. It was never supposed to be something that took freedom from other people. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We hold these truths self-evident. All men are created equal. All of these things are supposed to be our principles. But now there's another group of people resurging to say your practices are not in line with your principles, similar to what Dr. King said.
Somewhere that I read, right?
Somewhere I read, right? And this is what they're bringing to us. And leveraging capitalism to do it, I think is brilliant jujitsu on their part.
Tim, I want to ask, as someone who knows about Bad Bunny and has obviously been very familiar with him, what is his message? Is it more in line with, say, for example, a Public Enemy, or some of those lyrics that are attached to, yeah, I'm making a lot of money, but my people are hoes and sluts and, you know, shoot me, kill me, and lock me up, you know what I mean, in service to stereotypes? Like, as someone who understands Bad Bunny, what is his message?
Yeah, man, I think part of the clarity of Bad Bunny, is I'm sure we can appreciate in some other artists like Public Enemy and a couple other folks, is that they choose their front line and they stick to it. That Bad Bunny's first and foremost line has been about uplifting Puerto Rico, its economy, its people, right? For folks that don't know, Bad Bunny is the number one, largest artist in the entire world. And last year, instead of going on a world tour, decided to have a Puerto Rican residency where he did 30 shows at Puerto Rico and made sure that if you were a Puerto Rican citizen, then you had the right to be able to get tickets at a lesser price than an American who flies into Puerto Rico to watch the show. It was beautiful. It generated over $400 million for the Puerto Rican economy. And this is true, Brother Jeff. Every year, because of the United States' occupation of Puerto Rico and its extraction from its economy, Puerto Rico is in debt to the United States every single year. It has for the last 80 years, similar to how Haiti has to pay reparations to the French, right? And for the first time last year, because of Bad Bunny's residency, Puerto Rico did not owe the United States money because he made so much money for the local economy and the tax infrastructure. They were able to stabilize themselves, which is really important. Look, we can go through the images of the Super Bowl, right? And it's really important because he's dedicated to making sure that the narrative and liberation of Puerto Rico is first, foremost, and center. When we think about the songs that he sang a song yesterday called El Apagón, which is when they were on the light poles and they came down. That's in reference. You should watch the music video to anybody watching to El Apagón. It's 30 minutes, the music video, because it specifically talks about the Luma infrastructure, which is a single privately owned electricity grid owned by a company in Texas that operates 100% of the electricity in Puerto Rico. And in 2017, when Hurricane Maria came, the island was on a power outage for weeks, and a United States company did not go in to fix it. The president flew to Puerto Rico and threw paper towels at the people, right? Like, and so it's a deep critique of not only just the privatization of what should be a public resource like something for electricity, but specific to Puerto Rico, that it should not be a foreign United States single corporation that governs the electricity of a place that these people don't live. The second half of the Apagón video is about Act 22, Charter 42, which deal directly with the gentrification of Puerto Rico. So many white people like Logan Paul and Jake Paul, all these people are going because Puerto Rico is a tax haven. You don't pay federal taxes when you own property in Puerto Rico, but if you are from Puerto Rico and you buy a property, you pay federal taxes. So it's a tax haven for people to move in, and it's gentrified Latino neighborhoods. Puerto Rican kids can't go to public schools. All these other pieces, it's destabilizing their economy. The second piece, Bad Bunny committing to Puerto Rican liberation is clear in him flying the Independentista flag, and clear how he's talking about what I would label Pan-Americanism, about all of the American continent coming together, about critiques of the Fuera Luma protests, and specifically the Luma energy grid that has caused blackouts in Puerto Rico. He also is deeply critical of misogyny and machismo. The song Yo Perreo Sola that he sang while he was on top of the little house was written in response because reggaetones had a really kind of negative perception, similar to rap culture, about objectifying, commodifying women's bodies. And Yo Perreo Sola is a song for women to say, dance by yourself, right? That I'm gonna, twerk and do my own thing without a man. And so I do think that there are some real clear narratives that kind of all coagulate in this place, Brother Jeff, that I think, Bad Bunny is fighting for his people. And at no point is he walking back from that fight. He's willing to fight his own people to make them a little bit more free when it comes to machismo, when it comes to benefiting from American enterprise in Puerto Rico. And I think that him doubling down on those pieces is real important, and something that he's been doing since before he ever blew up. And so to see him double down on what he actually believes on the biggest stage in the world, I think is meaningful, because in 2050, Latinos are going to be faced with the choice of, do we become absorbed into white supremacy because we think that we're going to be some version of more free, or are we going to double down on our multicultural identity with black folks, with indigenous folks, with interracial folks, and understand that we can lead the way to a multiracial democracy? Bad Bunny's point in fighting for freedom for his people is inherently connected to what freedom is going to mean for all of us, and what that choice is going to mean when we eventually get there demographically.